agents carrying out proper arrests? Why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents...
Confrontation on Capitol Hill has ignited a new debate about free speech, immigration power, and the limits of government authority.
Representative Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. On March 21st, 2025, the State Department approved the revocation of a student visa for Romea Osturk, a Turkish citizen who is a graduate student at Tufts University, apparently simply for writing an op-ed. According to an internal State Department memo, you took this action under your discretionary authority to revoke visas, and soon after you revoked her visa, armed and masked plainclothes officers snatched Ms. Osturk off the street and transported her to a prison in Louisiana. Mr. Secretary, do you really think that Ms. Osturk's op-ed results in a foreign policy consequence for the United States?
I believe that case involves someone whose visa we never would have granted had we known ahead of time.
I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you if you think an op-ed, but that's exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Osturk's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities that were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Osturk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
But is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you, in the meanwhile, I have the authority, I will continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time, because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says, and that means that you are trumping the legal supreme court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country apart.
Secretary Rubio, I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like, and suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job. Who snatches her off the street?
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents, who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked? Is that
that law student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed. She wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
Reclaiming my time, you revoked her student visa because she wrote an op-ed.
And we'll do more. We're going to do more.
I have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that, quote, Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest who's here to stir up trouble.
Are you going to revoke the visa of somebody who made that?
I mean, the case, I'll look at it. I'm looking to get crazy people
actually,
our
it's
country.
not just about revoking.
Forward
You
to
actually,
revoking the
Secretary
visas of any
Rubio,
lunatics you
excuse
can
me,
identify.
reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You who granted that person
That's
to
a
enter
totally
the United
different process.
States.
That's someone that applied here through a totally different process.
Secretary Rubio,
student visas are a privilege.
Secretary
we deny
Rubio,
them all the time, and we'll revoke them.
You revoked a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for masked men to snatch somebody off the street.
Your time's expired.
That's your claim. That's not accurate.
Recognize ranking.
During a House hearing, Representative Pramila Jayapal challenged Secretary of State Marco Rubio over the case of Romea Osturk, a Turkish graduate student whose visa was revoked after she co-authored an opinion article. What began as a routine oversight exchange quickly turned into a constitutional argument about whether an administration can punish speech it dislikes by using immigration laws as a weapon. Jayapal laid out the timeline in stark terms. She said that in March 2025, the State Department approved the cancellation of Osturk's student visa under Rubio's discretionary authority. Soon after, armed and masked officers detained the student on the street and transported her to a detention facility in Louisiana. According to Jayapal, an internal memo from the State Department admitted there were not sufficient grounds to revoke the visa, and there was no evidence the student posed any threat to national security. A federal court later ordered her release, noting that the sole basis for the detention appeared to be the op-ed she had written for her university newspaper the year before. The Congresswoman pressed Rubio with a simple but explosive question. Did he really believe that writing an opinion article could create a foreign policy consequence serious enough to justify detention and removal from the country? Rubio answered that this was a person whose visa would never have been granted if officials had known what they later learned. Jayapal interrupted, insisting that the only thing the government had learned was that the student expressed a political view. She asked where in the Constitution it says the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech. Rubio responded with a legal argument that many immigration hardliners have used for years. He said there is no constitutional right to a student visa and that Congress has given the Secretary authority to determine whether a foreign national represents a threat. He added that visas are denied every day around the world and that he would continue to revoke visas of people he believes come to tear the country apart. For Jayapal, that answer was proof of the danger. She argued that the Immigration and Nationality Act cannot trump the Constitution and that punishing someone for an opinion is the very definition of violating the First Amendment. The exchange then shifted from legal theory to the disturbing details of the arrest. Jayapal demanded to know why masked, unidentified agents were used to seize a graduate student and why she was denied access to counsel for nearly 24 hours. Rubio said those operational decisions belonged to other agencies and that his responsibility was only the visa revocation. But he defended the use of masks, claiming officers need to hide their identities because radical extremists might try to hurt them. Jayapal rejected that explanation as absurd. She noted that American law enforcement has arrested some of the most dangerous criminals in the country without covering their faces, yet suddenly agents were afraid of a student who wrote an article. She accused Rubio of acting as if he were not only Secretary of State, but also National Security Advisor and immigration enforcer all at once. The Congresswoman repeatedly reminded him that Osturk was not accused of violence, espionage or terrorism, only of publishing an opinion. The federal judge who ordered Osturk's release seemed to agree with those concerns. In the ruling, the court observed that the government presented no evidence of criminal activity and relied solely on protected expression. Civil liberties groups say the case resembles tactics used by authoritarian governments, where visas and residency permits are revoked to punish dissent. The State Department has not released the full memo Jayapal referenced, leaving many unanswered questions about who recommended the action and on what basis. As the hearing ended, neither side appeared willing to yield. Rubio insisted he would continue to revoke visas whenever he believes it necessary. Jayapal vowed to keep fighting what she called an assault on constitutional freedoms. The clash captured a broader national struggle over how far executive power can reach in the name of security and whether the First Amendment truly protects everyone on American soil. If you want clear, independent reporting that breaks down these complex battles and explains what they mean for ordinary people, subscribe to the channel and stay connected for more in-depth coverage.